Documenting Mexican folk art linguistic heritage. The application of the set theory to determine its common terminology. The description and protection of cultural heritage, at least in Mexico, have been focused mainly on objects, putting aside very important linguistic components linked to them, their names, and the meaning the concepts evoke within their social context. The tradition centered on the objects of the institutions of the Mexican cultural sector has focused on the descriptions of the work and their preservation conditions, and it has neglected the description of the linguistic component whose purpose is to denominate objects. Taking into consideration the unavoidable relation between things and their denominations, as well as the fact that there are multiple international works on heritage, art, and architecture terminology, such as the Getty vocabularies and their different translations to other languages, Tesauros Diccionarios del Patrimonio Cultural de España, Iconclast, or Tesauro de la UNESCO, a method of terminological documentation is proposed in this article that allows focusing efforts on the documentation of terms of folk art in Mexico, and later to build controlled vocabularies related to the country's cultural sector. As one can foresee, the folk art domain in Mexico is an area of expertise with a mostly empirical knowledge, inherited among generations of artisans and artists, and with a pre-scientific character, which is why there are not enough moderated publications, and in which there is an absence of a wide textual tradition that can help build a big terminological corpus. Based on this, a method that takes into consideration the ethnological work in practice communities and the application of the set theory to determine the basic terminology of the area of knowledge is proposed, as well as the differentiated terminologies. The method consists of 3 steps. It is necessary to select the terminological sources that serve as a documental basis. Regarding the case of gray literature sources like in this case, museum labels or other types of informal information sources, the realization of an opportunistic selection of the terminology will be considered, manually identifying the terms and applying them in the transcription of these orthographic and lemmatization rules. Regarding the primary sources of documentation, that is, the informants, a questionnaire must be applied to obtain the available terminology. For all the previous cases, the terms must be organized in lists. Finally, the intersection of the sets must be performed or corroborate which terms of a list appear in the rest of lists or the terms that appear exclusively in others. This allows the analyzer to have a better idea about the more common terms and about the ones which are for a specific use, depending on the kind of sources. The folk arts terminology in Mexico. This first step corresponds to a type of convenience or purposive sampling in which we gather the lexicon registered in the exhibition labels of folk art. The course of action in this step was the following. Art historians, linguists, and other specialists involved attended different folk art exhibitions regularly during 2019 and beginning of 2020. All of them are or were presented in 10 museums of Mexico which exhibit or exhibited folk art collections. These institutions were the Museo Regional de Cholula, Museo Carrillo Gil, Museo del Centro Cultural Los Pinos, Museo de Arte Popular de la Ciudad de México, Museo Universitario de Arte Popular de Colima, Museo del Palacio de Valparaíso, Museo del Palacio de Iturbide, Museo Nacional de Culturas Populares, Museo Nacional de Antropología y Museo de la Máscara de la Peña de Bernal. The labels for these museums are like the case represented in Figure 2 in the arrangement of their works information. This example was photographed at the Museo de Arte Popular de la Ciudad de México. As can be seen in the figure, information related to the type of object is presented, such as paño de Carranza, Carranza cloth, the agent or institution producer of such work, Asociación S.N.A. Jolovil, the work's place of origin, San Cristóbal de las Casas, Chiapas, the materials and techniques involved in its manufacturing, algodón y lino tejidos en telar de cintura y brocados con articela, cotton and linen woven in waist loom and brocade with articela. and the agent's owner of the object. Colección AMAP Fomento Cultural Banamex. The available lexicon is a potential set of lexical units that are part of the mental lexicon of a speaker. This set is cognitively arranged from various themes, also known as centres d'intérêt. Some applications of the lexical availability method have focused on determining the fundamental lexicon of a particular language, detecting the main shortcomings of vocabulary in students of pre-university or middle-level school, knowing the variety in the general lexicon present in different dialectal areas of Spain and Hispanic America, and more recently, gathering the terminology of an area of knowledge through the application of a questionnaire. This adaptation of the lexical availability methodology for documenting terms involves the application of a presential questionnaire to a group of informants, specialized in a domain knowledge. The list or lists of lexical units obtained are open since the surveyed informants have the freedom to write all possible lexical items that they relate to the themes. In this case, I seized the seminar reunion of the PAPIT IN 400520 project Artesanías en Transición of the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México's Instituto de Investigaciones Estéticas, where 17 specialists of folk art historians, anthropologists, museologists involved in the topic, and students of history and Latin American studies majors, for them to answer a lexical terminological availability questionnaire I developed ad hoc. This questionnaire has 6 questions related to 6 topics: work types, materials, techniques, styles, geographic names, agents, ethnic groups, traits, artisan branches. In this last step proposed for the validation of common and differential terminologies of folk art, 2 procedures have been implemented. The first one is the integration of a textual corpus of available documents of the area. The second one is the comparison of the 2 sets of terminological lists obtained with the source of documentation of the corpus, and the determination of the common and differential terminologies. As mentioned before, the available textual documentation on the area of folk art in Mexico is scarce. For example, the searches in the catalog of the Biblioteca Justino Fernández only records a total of 272 documents under the theme folk art, less than 0.5% of all the works of the library. If this data is already of concern, it is relevant to consider that this figure is even lower for the case of the description of folk art in Mexico, since the documentation regarding Mexico is comprised of only 116 documents. That means around 0.2% of the whole collection. In virtue of this, during the last 2 years, a proposal to work in a seminar has been put forward. The seminar Artesanías en Transición, whose objective is to share, concentrate, and discuss several theoretical lectures on folk art in Mexico. The revision process and bibliographic discussion of the seminar have allowed us to concentrate and review 118 texts of folk art, 90 documents in Spanish and 20 in English and French, that do not strictly match the ones present at the Biblioteca Justino Fernández, but do have the features of academic rigor and relevance the seminar requires. After finishing the terminological documentation work in the museums and the application of the terminological availability questionnaire with specialists in the area, 6 lists of candidate terms with more than 5,000 lexical items could be incorporated. However, in order to provide a guarantee that the candidate terms were in fact terminological units of the domain, a procedure of validation of the terms in the documentation of our corpus were implemented. To summarize, the efforts to validate and determine the common terminology of the domain, considering our data, is comprised of 3 steps. First, we start from the lists of terms obtained in the museums. Secondly, we corroborate that the terms were recorded in the lists of candidate terms obtained through the lexical availability method. Finally, we looked for the terms in the documents of the corpus. In this way, we could validate and identify the common terminology of folk art in Mexico, assuming each source of terminological information works as a different type of authority. As explained before, at this stage, only 5 lists will be worked on: work type, materials, techniques, styles, geographic names, and associated concepts, leaving the list of agents for other stages of the research. The result of this information crossing can be graphically represented as follows, where the intersection of the terminology documented in labels set A, the available terminology set B, and the terminology documented in the corpus set C can be seen in black, ABC, and represents the common terminology of the domain. Lastly, 3 additional sets where sets A and B, B and C, and A and C intersect can be seen, which, in this case, represent the differential terminologies used in museums and by specialists and in documents, and in museums and by specialists. These sets would be a more specialized selection of the terminology, while the intersection of the 3 sets would be the most common. This research shows the application of an ethnographical procedure and diverse strategies for lexical documentation to the compilation and validation of the terminology of a domain knowledge with scarce written tradition, the folk art in Mexico. The result obtained from the lexicon through the different methods and strategies and documentation applied allows registering several terminological lists. From these lists, and by determining the intersection of 2 or more lexical sets, a principle obtained from the set theory, one can obtain a group that contains the most frequent elements or the common terminology of a domain. Finally, we can see 2 slides where all the references for this work are presented.